I'm Derek Speck, and I'm the Economic Development Administrator for a city beside Seattle, and the name of that city is Tukwila, Washington. I've worked in the field of economic development for over 20 years, and the things that I find the most interesting about it are, first off, you get to learn a lot about the different kinds of businesses that make up our community and our economy, and I find the different businesses really interesting. And also, in my role in economic development, I get to have an impact on what kind of a community the city of Tukwila is, and I find that really interesting. How do you create a better community for people? So to me, that's really interesting. So economic development is a pretty broad subject area, but basically it boils down to improving the economy of some region. So that could be improving the economy of a city or a county or a state or even the nation. And usually what people mean when they talk about economic development, usually they mean attracting something to that geographic region. So for instance, and most often it's jobs. So a lot of communities around the United States, if they have somebody working in economic development, they are actually trying to attract jobs to their community. But it could also be other kinds of work. So some communities might already have plenty of jobs, so they don't need to attract jobs, but maybe they want a certain type of development. They might have an issue where they need to attract housing. Or they might want to attract certain kinds of businesses, either because they want tax revenue or because they want some kinds of amenities for their residents. An example there might be a community might try to attract retail because maybe they want retail sales tax, or the community might try to attract certain types of businesses to make it more enjoyable for the residences. Like let's say there's a small town with no restaurant. They might try to attract restaurants to their town. So economic development's really about how do you have a good economy within a region, and usually it's about attracting businesses to help build that economy. But it's not always even about just attracting them. In some cases, it's about helping existing businesses grow. So for instance, why spend all your time attracting a restaurant to your community if you already have somebody in your community that's got a small restaurant and maybe you just want to help them increase the size of their restaurant? Or why attract a manufacturing business to your community if you've got a small manufacturer already there and really they just need help getting financing or marketing help or some other kind of assistance to help them grow? So basically, economic development in general, it's either attracting business or you're helping existing businesses grow. So usually I'm on the computer a lot, and I'm also usually talking with people a lot, whether it's on the phone or a Microsoft Teams meeting or in person. And so a lot of times there are things like there's businesses that simply are asking for some help on something. So for instance, a business might say, hey, Derek, we're already a business in the city of Tukwila, and we want to expand our business. Can you tell us what the permit process is like and help us get through the permit process to expand? Now, the permit staff don't report to me. They're in a different department of the city, but I understand that process, and so I can tell the business a little bit about what to expect and how do they, submit for their permit applications. It could be a business that says, hey, Derek, we want to expand, but we need to get financing, and we need help trying to find financing. Some businesses know how to do that, others don't. And so I can steer them to resources. I would say, there's a small business development center at the local community college, and they have counselors there that can provide free counseling, and they can introduce you to banks and other lending organizations that help you find financing. Or I could say, let me introduce you to the Chamber of Commerce, because the Chamber of Commerce provides this kind of assistance also. So I'll, talk to businesses about questions like that. It might be that there's special projects we're doing as a city. So for instance, right now for Tukwila, one of our projects is we want to create an economic development plan for the city, meaning it'd be a plan so that our city council and the residents that have interest in it can all be on the same page as to what are our goals for the city? What kinds of businesses do we want to bring to the city? What kinds of assistance we want to have for our residents and helping them find jobs? And so like part of my day now is I'm working with a consultant that will help us gather data on information about what we have in terms of businesses or what our needs might be. And so I would talk to the consultant. We would put together plans on hey, how are we going to engage our residents in this process? So should we do an online survey? And now we're talking about, well, maybe we should do some kind of a TikTok thing to try to get people to have fun and provide information to the city about what they want the city to be. We also do things in terms of a day-to-day basis where it could be, I do a lot of editing of documents. So let's say so one of the things we do is we market the city. We want to attract visitors to our city, and we have some money from taxes on hotel stays that we can use to market to bring in more visitors. And so to do that, like in Tukwila's case, we created a website and a whole social media platform we call Experience Tukwila. And we're trying to tell the story about what are the fun things to do if you come to the city of Tukwila, because most people wouldn't know because we're such a small city. And so we would edit information that we're going to use to promote through those social media sites. We might also come up with ideas. So for instance, in Tukwila, we have a professional rugby team called the Seattle Seawolves, and they practice and they play at a sports stadium in Tukwila. So we want to promote them because by promoting them, it's promoting our city. And so they just got into the Major League Rugby finals this year. And so I have one staff member, and so he coordinated a special event on this past Friday where we had a media event. And so he's contacting media, doing a press release, inviting some elected officials and the Sea Wolves to come and do some kind of a ceremony. In this case, they did a ball giveaway, and as a way of promoting the Sea Wolves and the playoffs. And so in a case like that, you're out on site and you're working with those different businesses or different people, elected officials and the media. On the flip side, there could be other, you could have an emergency. And if it's an emergency, then because we have a lot of contact with businesses, we could get pulled into doing outreach to the businesses to help them understand what's going on. As an example, a few years ago, literally on Thanksgiving Day, I got a phone. I was home, right? We're making Thanksgiving dinner, and I got a phone call because the county health department will test water, and they want to make sure water is clean. And one of the tests came back from one of the water sites in our city, and the water tested unhealthy. And we thought if that test was a valid test, until that problem gets figured out, we would have to shut down the mall. Like, we have the largest mall in the Pacific Northwest in Tukwila, actually. And it was literally Thanksgiving Day, and probably the biggest day of sales in a mall is the day after Thanksgiving. And so the fact of that we might have to shut the mall and other businesses down because the water wasn't safe. So we immediately had to go into the office. We had to leave the turkey in the oven and go into the office and work with our emergency manager and our fire department and the county health department and the water department to try to figure out, how do we get that test verified? How do we find out? And so then we had to start notifying. So in that case, my role was helping notify businesses that this was a potential. So we worked with the mall, so they had a backup plan if we did have to, shut them down. Luckily, we didn't. Luckily, the test came back in time, the second test, and it was just the first test was just a bad one, and so it all worked out. But my point is that sometimes you get pulled into even like emergency situations. I think in economic development, when hiring entry-level people, it's really about finding people that are just interested in business, people that are interested in government, people that Usually in entry-level positions, we like them to do research. And so somebody that likes doing research, whether it's internet research or some other kinds of research, people that a lot of times, again, for these entry-level positions, we like having help in writing reports. So somebody that's enjoys writing, good writing skills. I think another key skill set for good economic development managers, people that like interacting with other people, because a lot of it does involve networking. I think public speaking is a good skill set for economic development, because a lot of times you're presenting information in public settings. And then I think also enjoying helping businesses. I think that's a key skill set. So I think one thing to keep in mind is with public jobs, like economic development jobs in the public sector, the great thing is usually the cities, counties, states are listing those jobs on their websites. So one thing to do is just to start looking at cities, counties, state websites that you think you might want to work at and start just tracking jobs available there. Also, like in certain regions, there may be other kinds of websites that aggregate job available information. So for instance, in the Seattle area, a lot of cities all put their job listings on a website called NeoGov, N-E-O-G-O-V. And so if somebody's interested, I would say, oh, you know what, check NeoGov every day and just see what jobs get posted. So I think that's a good start. I think, of course, making contacts and just starting to network with people in those fields. So there are some organizations. So there's a economic development organization called IEDC, International Economic Development Council, I think. And so it's like a global economic development organization, but it's primarily United States. And so I would say try to get your foot in the door there. And so, for instance, it may be expensive to become a member. So if you're a high school student or a college student, you may not have the money to become a member. Although a lot of times those organizations will have student rates for memberships. And one thing that I did when I was in grad school, I was, tight on money. So what I did is I contacted a couple of those organizations that were doing sort of economic development and community kind of city management work in the LA area where I was going to school. And I just said, hey, I see you have a conference coming up. I'm a student. I can't really afford to pay to enter the conference, but could I volunteer for the conference? And if I did that, could I get to go to some of your sessions? And they almost always say yes, because they want more people in the industry. And so, for instance, there were times where, yeah, sure, I would spend a day working at the registration table, but then they would give me a day where I could attend the conference and start networking and talking to people. And so I think talking to people about what they do is a great way to do that. Internships are available, but it really depends on the city or the region or the county. And it also depends on the economy at the time. So for instance, city of Tukwila, years ago, our city council said we really want to help our local high school students get internships. And so we had like an intern from our local high school in every department at our city. But that was pre-COVID pandemic. And so now the economies have changed. And so currently, of course, we couldn't do internships during COVID. And then currently our budget's under a little bit more stress than it was before the pandemic. And so we probably will have like a couple of internships in the city, but we probably will not have one in economic development this year. But other governments are doing much better. And so just because we may not be having internships, other cities may. And so I think it's a great thing. And even if a city doesn't promote them or offer them, if somebody is interested in that particular city for some reason and they're interested in economic development, by all means, it's really easy to just approach the city manager's office of the city and say, hey, I would love to do a part-time unpaid internship. And a lot of cities would say, all right, sure, come on in. We'll work with you on one particular project. And that's really just a great way to start. Well, I think the first thing I would offer to any young person thinking about what career to go into, I would say the first thing is take a breath, realize that there is a million pathways out there and nobody knows all the pathways. And sometimes you won't see a path until you start going down partway on one path, and then you'll see other options open up. And so really, there's a lot of times there's pressure to feel like you know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your entire life. And like almost nobody knows that. And even if people think they know that, like I thought I knew that. Like when I went to grad school, on my application, I want to become a city manager. And it only was until I was actually working for city managers' offices and I realized, oh, there's a path of economic development open, and I'm better fit for economic development than I am to become a city manager. And so I think it's like, yes, have a goal, because it's good to have a goal because at least you start going down some path. You start going in some direction. And so for economic development, if you think you want to go into that, then yes, get a job in economic development, keep your eyes peeled for types of careers within that world, because there's a lot of different ways to go. I would say try to think about yourself and your personality and what really makes a difference for you. So in my case, I knew I wanted to be in a smaller organization where I felt like I could wear a lot of hats and I wasn't going to be lost. What that meant was I wanted to work for a city. I did not want to work for a state. I did not want to work for the federal government because I was worried about if you're federal government, you might just be one person in a large department. And so, but different people have different preferences. And so trying to understand what that is. And so, yeah, I would just say, yes, pick a direction, start heading that direction, realize you'll probably have to change direction partly along the way, and just try to listen to yourself and to see, yes, is this still the right path or not? And then have the courage to make a change if you need to. When I wanted to move to the Seattle area for a job, I was in economic development in California. I wanted to move to the Seattle area. Yes, I had to take a pay cut to get to the job I wanted in the Seattle area. Yes, I had to take a cut in my benefits, like my vacation time, to get up here. But a lot of times those are short-term, temporary things. And if you think it gets you to what you really want to do and where you want to be, sometimes making those choices, it's worth it to make some of those short-term choices for a longer-term gain.